So if you saw my launch review on this case, the Lian Li B4, I mentioned how much of a chore building with a 360 was. So I must be glutton for punishment because here I am doing it again. Welcome to Machines and More. So if you're new here, I'm a PC enthusiast and a content creator. I'm always looking for new products and ideas to share with PC builders all around the world. So I appreciate it if you would consider subscribing to the channel. Big thanks. So hopefully you got to take a look at the B4 launch review that I did. I was made aware by Dan Cases that there was a configuration that they had missed in the manual initially. One of my concerns was like the PSU placement, not entirely too flexible, but here we have an alternate power supply position that is possible with a mini-itx board. And I know I said I wouldn't really want to experience a 360mm build again with this case, but I wanted to make sure that I covered everything. So, you know, let's try that 360mm thing all over again for science. For M.2 you're still going to need an SFX power supply for your 360mm liquid-cooled build. But when you use a mini-itx board, you can actually place an ATX power supply flat next to the board with the power connectors turned towards the board. If you have an SFX power supply or SFX-L, you can use an ATX to SFX adapter plate and then place it there as well. So what I did was I tried out Lian Li's ATX power supply here. This is the SX-1000P along with the Asus B850-i mini-itx board. In my experience, this is the best B850 ITX currently. And Lian Li's ATX power supply here is a 1000-watt unit and 140mm long, so it can fit in either orientation. The first problem, though, with placing a power supply like this is it really shortens the cable distance. So if you are using stock power supply cables, you will have a ton of slack cable to manage, and I just try my best here to, in the limited time that I have. With an ATX unit, you're going to have a lot more slack. SFX unit will have shorter cables out of the box typically, but then be prepared to manage that because you still have more than usual. So this position gives us about 80mm of radiator space, so we're no longer impeded in front of the third fan position like I showed in the previous build. With this board, there's not a top heatsink, so you could often just swap in a 25mm set of top fans here for certain builds. However, the power supply, specifically the cage, will prevent that from happening over the second fan here. The slim fan is practically next to it, and I found it quite prudent to place a cage over the left, the 120mm slim that you see here, because I was always having issues with stray cables and what have you hitting those blades with both the air-cooled and the liquid-cooled build that I did. So another thing I did here was, for this reattempt, I removed the rear fan cage when building, so I had more latitude to slide the rad in and out. And then I still found it safer to install the fans on the outside of the rad due to all the potential stray cables that we now have inside. And I just did some quick cable management just to keep things out of the way. Given the time I had to retest this, I think that was good enough. But I think if you really want to do this type of build, you're really going to want custom cables or a way to shorten them. So with all the excess cable, the graphics card actually became very difficult, kind of finicky to mount. The bottom edge of the cage, it's already going to place that hard stop directly along the back plate of the card. So you really do have to be careful here. Again, also be conscious of how you manage the tubes from the AIO if that's what you're using. So in this configuration, it perhaps felt slightly less annoying to work with the 360. I still managed to rough up the paint on the end here even more, since there are just so many sharp edges on the inside of this front frame here. And I did notice something that I'll show you after the thermal comparison. I think is actually pretty key here. So did the 360mm perform better here now that the third fan is free to breathe? Actually, it did a little bit. I only retested the intake, since I think the implications will be the same here, you know, when we look at versus the exhaust. But we're a little bit better here at the same RPMs versus the previous SFX setup with the, you know, the cage in the side position and the 9950X3D. It's going to be very comfortable here at this temp. We're not even at full speed on the fan, so we have even more headroom remaining here. So this is very good here. For the gaming temps, though, it's kind of the same story. And just to recap, the temps were mostly okay, but it required very high fan speeds, and it was very loud to accomplish that. 85% fans on this GPU. And what I did was keep the fan RPMs the same so we can clearly see what the impact is. And here they're very slightly better. But my issue here is not the temps that the card can get to. This card should not have to run anywhere near this high of a fan speed to achieve these temps. And so that suggests to me something is severely wrong with the airflow. Let me show you what's happening. I'll just pop the case open from the top and you can kind of look in. So as mentioned, the ATX power supply and the solid-sided cage, it sets a hard stop directly over the card. And with how thick this unit is, the test card here is an ASUS Prime 5080. The flow-through section where the third fan operates is heavily blocked off. So there's that sliver of space here between the rad and the power supply where some airflow can happen, but it's not that meaningful. Now, if we look back at the previous build with the SFX power supply, I understand now why the GPU thermals were so concerning there, at least the performance with those high fan speeds. The card was more blocked off because there was practically no breathing room between the power supply like this and the card. So that scenario was even worse. So even though it was a little bit better with the alternate configuration, I don't think it's that great here either. If you have a similar card cooler design, it could be an issue. Plenty of card cooler designs right now in this 300-ish millimeter length in both current and previous generations will face a similar issue. My Prime card here is 304 millimeters long. Pretty average card length now, I think, and they'll also, a lot of them will have that flow-through section, such as the Founders Edition cards have 2 flow-through sections. The 5080 there is also 304 millimeters long, so over this end right here, you could be looking at the same issue if your rad goes out that far. Shorter cards like this is a ASUS Dual, or cards significantly longer than this with this, flow-through section past the power supply, that could potentially avoid that issue depending on if you're using the side mount SFX. Just be aware though, if you're attempting the 360 millimeter build, do consider your card section. I think you could avoid the issue potentially using the SFX power supply in the ATX cage can also work. That'll give you a little bit of space. There's small vents in the power supply cage, although this is just a small vent there. Long story short, I think this configuration can be viable. However, you will need at minimum an ITX board, and recommend custom cables or the shorter cables with an SFX unit, especially if you want to install the SFX unit in the ATX power supply to give a little bit more breathing room. I don't know how many users are going to look at this case and say, hey, I'm going to run an ITX board, SFX power supply with that adapter plate, potentially go out and get custom cables, all of that extra, stuff that for this $70-ish case, right? But I did want to make sure I tested it for completeness. So I do have an idea to fix this though. So stay tuned. Make sure you give a like and or sub. Check out the links down below. And if you haven't watched the launch review, please go ahead and check that out. So I'll see you in the next one.